Detective Emily Carter had seen her fair share of strange cases, but nothing quite like this. She had made a name for herself in the San Antonio Police Department with her keen intuition and relentless pursuit of the truth. When she received an anonymous tip about the old Riverview Hotel, she couldn't ignore it. The tip hinted at mysterious disappearances and ghostly apparitions, piquing her curiosity. Armed with her trusty notebook and a small digital camera, Emily decided to check it out herself. The Riverview Hotel stood ominously at the edge of the San Antonio River, its once grand facade now weathered and cracked. The building loomed over the street, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch out and grab at passers-by. Ivy clung to the stone walls, and the windows were grimy with years of neglect. As she approached the entrance, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced around, but the street was empty. Inside, the lobby was a stark contrast to the exterior. It was eerily quiet, with the only sound being the distant drip of water from a leaky pipe. The air was thick with a musty scent, and the grand chandelier overhead flickered intermittently. The decor was dated, yet there was an attempt to maintain an air of elegance with faded Persian rugs and tarnished brass fixtures. Emily approached the front desk, where a middle-aged man with a tired expression greeted her. His name tag read John, and he looked up with a forced smile. "Welcome to the Riverview Hotel. How can I assist you today?" he asked, his voice tinged with a hint of unease. "I'd like to check in, please," Emily replied, adopting the persona of a curious tourist. "I heard this place has a lot of history." John's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Yes, we have quite a storied past. Room 213 is available. Will that be all right?" Emily nodded and filled out the necessary paperwork. As John handed her the key, his hand trembled slightly. "If you need anything, just call the front desk," he said, almost as if he was pleading with her not to. Her room was on the second floor, and the elevator ride was slow and creaky. The corridor leading to her room was dimly lit, with faded wallpaper peeling at the edges. Emily noticed that some of the other guests seemed uneasy, their eyes darting around nervously. An elderly couple whispered to each other, glancing over their shoulders as they hurried to their room. Room 213 was modest but clean. The bed was made neatly, and the window offered a view of the river below. Emily set her suitcase down and began unpacking, her mind already working through the possible leads and questions she would need to ask. That night, she lay in bed, trying to relax and formulate her plan for the investigation. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. She jolted awake, heart pounding. The scream echoed through the halls, chilling her to the bone. Grabbing her flashlight and notebook, she cautiously stepped out of her room. The corridor was empty, but the air was thick with tension. She followed the sound, her footsteps echoing softly on the carpet. As she reached the end of the hall, the screaming stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. She found herself in front of room 301. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold draft seeped through the gap. Pushing the door open with trepidation, she entered the room. It was empty, but the furniture was in disarray, as if someone had left in a hurry. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. Emily's eyes were drawn to the mirror above the dresser. Scrawled in what looked like condensation were the words, "Help us." She felt a chill run down her spine. Her instincts told her that this was just the beginning of something far more sinister than she had anticipated. As she stood there, trying to piece together what had just happened, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she quickly exited the room, her mind racing. This case was turning out to be more than just a simple investigation. The Riverview Hotel held dark secrets, and Emily was determined to uncover them no matter the cost. The morning light did little to dispel the eerie feeling that had settled over Emily since the previous night's encounter. Determined to uncover the truth, she began her investigation with renewed vigor. After a quick breakfast in the eerily quiet dining room, she made her way to the hotel's front desk. John, the desk clerk, looked even more haggard in the daylight. Emily approached him with a friendly demeanor, hoping to put him at ease. "Morning, John. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions about the hotel's history. I'm quite fascinated by old buildings and their stories." John hesitated, glancing around nervously before nodding. "Sure, but there's not much to tell," he said, his voice lacking conviction. Emily smiled warmly. "I appreciate it. Has anything strange ever happened here? Any old ghost stories or unexplained events?" John's eyes flickered with a hint of fear. "There have been incidents. People say they hear things, see things that aren't there. Some guests have left in the middle of the night, too scared to stay." Emily noted the tension in his voice. "Have there been any disappearances?" John swallowed hard, avoiding her gaze. "Yes, a few. Over the years, some guests checked in and never checked out. The police investigated, but they never found anything." Emily thanked John and headed to the hotel's basement, where she had noticed a dusty, neglected door labeled Records Room. She jimmied the lock with a bobby pin, an old trick she had learned early in her detective career. The door creaked open, revealing shelves upon shelves of old, dusty records and documents. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Emily pulled on a pair of latex gloves and began sifting through the files. She found guest registers dating back to the hotel's opening in the early 1900s. As she flipped through the pages, she noticed a pattern: names of guests who checked in but never checked out. The disappearances spanned decades, all with eerie regularity. One particular file caught her eye. It was a thick, leather-bound journal belonging to a former hotel manager, a man named Walter Green. The entries were meticulous at first, detailing daily operations and guest complaints. But as Emily read on, the tone grew increasingly frantic and desperate. April 23rd, 1952. Another guest has vanished. Mrs. Thompson in room 214. She was here one moment, gone the next. No trace, no clues. The police are baffled. June 15th, 1952. I hear them at night. Whispers, pleas for help. They haunt my dreams. I can't escape their cries. August 5th, 1952. The spirits are restless. They demand justice. I fear for my sanity. The hotel is cursed. Emily's hands trembled as she read the final entry, dated September 12th, 1952. September 12th, 1952. I can no longer bear the weight of their screams. They are everywhere, watching, waiting. I fear they will take me next. If anyone finds this journal, please uncover the truth and set them free. The chilling words sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She felt a sudden cold draft and looked up to see a shadowy figure standing at the entrance to the records room. It was a woman, her face pale and eyes hollow. The ghostly apparition pointed to a dusty old suitcase in the corner before vanishing into thin air. Emily approached the suitcase cautiously. It was old and battered, covered in a thick layer of dust. She opened it, revealing a collection of personal belongings: clothes, a hairbrush, and a photograph of a young woman. The same woman who had just appeared to her. The photograph had a name written on the back: Sarah Thompson. Emily's heart raced as she realized this was the missing guest from Walter Green's journal. She carefully documented everything, knowing this was crucial evidence. Armed with the journal and the suitcase, Emily returned to her room to review her findings. She spread out the contents on the bed, trying to make sense of it all. The hotel had a dark past, and the spirits of the missing guests were trapped, crying out for justice. As she pondered her next move, a knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find one of the current guests, a nervous young woman named Lisa. "Detective Carter, I need your help," Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I saw something last night. A ghost. It was trying to tell me something." Emily invited Lisa in, eager to hear her story. Together they pieced together the clues, realizing that the spirits were not just haunting the hotel. They were reaching out, seeking help to uncover the truth and find peace. The mystery was deeper than Emily had anticipated, but she was more determined than ever to solve it. The Riverview Hotel held dark secrets, and she was on the brink of discovering them. Emily's mind raced with the new information she had uncovered. The chilling entries in Walter Green's journal and the haunting presence of Sarah Thompson's ghost pointed to a dark and twisted history that the Riverview Hotel had long tried to bury. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Emily decided to delve deeper into the hotel's past. She started her day by visiting the San Antonio Public Library, hoping to find more information on Charles Delacroix, the hotel's original owner. The library's archives were extensive, and Emily spent hours poring over old newspapers, property records, and historical documents. Emily found an article from the early 1900s that provided her with a chilling insight into Delacroix's life. The article detailed his rise to wealth and prominence, but it also hinted at his darker dealings. Several unexplained disappearances were linked to his properties, but no evidence had ever surfaced to incriminate him. The article also mentioned that Delacroix had vanished mysteriously, just like his victims, his body never found. Intrigued by the mention of Delacroix's illicit activities, Emily dug further into police records from that era. She discovered reports of missing persons who were last seen entering the Riverview Hotel. Despite numerous investigations, the cases remained unsolved, and the hotel continued to operate, its reputation gradually fading into obscurity. Emily's next stop was the local historical society, where she met with an elderly historian named Mrs. Thompson. She shared her findings and asked if Mrs. Thompson knew anything more about the hotel's history. Mrs. Thompson leaned back in her chair, her eyes clouded with memories. "The Riverview Hotel has always had a dark aura about it," she said. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about Charles Delacroix. He was a charming man, but there were always whispers about the things he did in the shadows. People would check into his hotel and never be seen again. It's said that he made a pact with dark forces to ensure his wealth and power. Emily listened intently as Mrs. Thompson recounted the legends. After Delacroix disappeared, his family tried to keep the hotel running, but the hauntings began almost immediately. Guests reported seeing apparitions, hearing voices, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The staff would often quit after just a few days, too terrified to stay. Mrs. Thompson paused, her expression grave. I believe the spirits of Delacroix's victims are trapped in the hotel, unable to move on. They were innocent souls, and their cries for justice have echoed through the halls for decades. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Emily returned to the Riverview Hotel, her determination stronger than ever. She needed to find a way to communicate with the spirits and uncover the truth about their fates. That evening, she gathered her notes and prepared for another night of investigation. As she walked the dimly lit corridors, she could feel the oppressive atmosphere weighing down on her. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and mildew, and the flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. Emily made her way to room 214, the room where Sarah Thompson had vanished. The room was cold, the temperature dropping noticeably as she entered. Emily set up a small camera and a digital recorder, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. Hours passed, and just as Emily was about to call it a night, the temperature plummeted further, and a faint whisper echoed through the room. She strained to hear the words, but they were too faint. Suddenly, the digital recorder crackled to life, and a clear, haunting voice filled the room. "Help us. Find him. Free us." Emily's heart raced as the voice faded away. She played back the recording to ensure she had heard correctly. The voice was unmistakably that of Sarah Thompson. Emily knew she was on the right track. The spirits were reaching out, desperate for someone to uncover the truth and bring them justice. She spent the next few days meticulously documenting her findings and continuing her research. She interviewed more of the hotel staff and guests, piecing together the fragmented stories and sightings. The pattern became clear. The spirits were linked to the dark deeds of Charles Delacroix and the unresolved crimes that had taken place within the hotel's walls. As Emily delved deeper, she began to experience more intense and vivid visions. She saw glimpses of the past, shadowy figures being led into hidden rooms, muffled screams, and the sinister grin of Charles Delacroix as he carried out his heinous acts. Each vision left her more shaken, but also more determined to put an end to the hauntings. One evening, while reviewing her notes in her room, Emily felt a sudden chill. She looked up to see the ghostly figure of Sarah Thompson standing before her. The apparition was more solid than before, her eyes filled with desperation and hope. Sarah pointed to a spot on the floor, and as Emily approached, the vision faded. She knelt down and carefully pried up a loose floorboard, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, she found a bundle of old letters and photographs, each one bearing the names and faces of the missing guests. Among them was a detailed ledger, meticulously documenting Delacroix's dealings and the names of his victims. This was the evidence Emily needed. She knew she had to bring these documents to the authorities and ensure that the hotel's dark history was finally brought to light. But as she prepared to leave, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder and heard a low, menacing voice. "You will not take them. The truth dies here." Emily spun around, her flashlight flickering, but there was no one there. The air grew colder, and she knew she had to act quickly. She gathered the documents and made her way to the lobby, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The spirits of the Riverview Hotel were counting on her, and she would not let them down. As Emily gathered the documents and evidence she had found, a sense of urgency filled her. The oppressive atmosphere of the Riverview Hotel seemed to intensify, as if the very walls were closing in on her. She knew she had to act quickly before the malevolent spirit of Charles Delacroix could stop her. With the ledger and letters securely tucked in her bag, she made her way towards the lobby, her senses heightened and every shadow seeming to hide a potential threat. Emily's flashlight flickered as she walked through the dimly lit corridors, the cold draft intensifying with each step. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old buildings settling. She kept her guard up, knowing that Delacroix's spirit could strike at any moment. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and Emily felt a chilling presence behind her. She spun around, flashlight in hand, and saw the faint outline of Charles Delacroix's ghost. His eyes were hollow, his grin twisted with malevolence. He moved closer, his form becoming more defined with each step. "You think you can uncover my secrets and escape?" Delacroix's voice was a cold, menacing whisper. "You are just another victim, like the rest." Emily stood her ground, her heart pounding. "I'm not afraid of you, Delacroix. Your reign of terror ends tonight." The ghostly figure let out a sinister laugh, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. "You cannot defeat me. I am bound to this place, and so are the souls of my victims. They belong to me." Just then, a cold gust of wind blew through the hallway, extinguishing Emily's flashlight. She was plunged into darkness, but she could still feel Delacroix's presence, his cold breath on her neck. Summoning all her courage, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small vial of holy water and a bundle of sage she had brought as a precaution. With a shaking hand, she lit the sage and began to walk slowly, chanting a cleansing ritual she had learned during her research. The thick smoke filled the corridor, and she could feel the tension in the air as the malevolent spirit grew agitated. Delacroix's ghost let out a piercing wail, and Emily felt a surge of icy energy as he tried to stop her. Determined to break the hold Delacroix had over the hotel, Emily continued her ritual, moving through the corridors and down the grand staircase to the lobby. The air grew thicker with the smell of burning sage, and the flickering chandelier cast eerie shadows on the walls. The ghosts of Delacroix's victims began to appear, their faces filled with a mix of hope and fear. As she reached the lobby, Emily saw the remaining guests and staff gathered, drawn by the commotion. Their eyes widened in fear as they saw the ghostly apparitions surrounding Emily, but she motioned for them to stay calm. She explained quickly and urgently, "These spirits are trapped here because of Delacroix's evil deeds. We need to help them find peace." John, the desk clerk, stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Tell us what to do," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Emily handed him a bundle of sage and a lighter. "Light this and walk through the lobby, chanting this prayer," she instructed, giving him the words. She turned to the other guests, handing out more sage and instructing them to do the same. "We need to cleanse this place and free the spirits." As they began the ritual, the ghosts grew more agitated, their wails echoing through the lobby. The temperature dropped even further, and a dark, swirling mist began to form at the center of the room. Emily knew this was Delacroix's last stand. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, holding the vial of holy water high. "Charles Delacroix, your time of tormenting the innocent is over," she declared, her voice strong and unwavering. "By the power of these spirits and the light of truth, I banish you from this place." With that, she opened the vial and splashed the holy water into the swirling mist. There was a blinding flash of light, and Delacroix's ghost let out a blood-curdling scream. The dark mist began to dissipate, and the air grew warmer. The ghosts of the victims appeared around Emily, their faces serene and grateful. As the light faded, the lobby was left in an eerie silence. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the Riverview Hotel for decades seemed to lift. Emily looked around and saw the faces of the guests and staff filled with relief and awe. The ghosts of Delacroix's victims began to fade, their forms dissolving into the air. One by one they vanished, their souls finally free. Sarah Thompson's ghost appeared before Emily one last time, a grateful smile on her face. "Thank you," she whispered before fading away completely. Emily felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, but also a deep sense of satisfaction. She had done it. She had uncovered the truth and freed the souls trapped within the hotel's walls. The Riverview Hotel was finally at peace. The guests and staff gathered around Emily, offering their thanks and expressions of gratitude. John shook her hand, his eyes filled with admiration. "You saved us all, Detective Carter. Thank you." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the night lift from her shoulders. "I'm just glad it's over. Let's make sure this place never falls into darkness again." As the dawn broke over San Antonio, the Riverview Hotel stood as a testament to the power of truth and justice. Emily knew there would be more cases, more mysteries to solve, but for now she was content knowing she had made a difference. The spirits of the past could finally rest, and so could she. As the first light of dawn filtered through the dusty windows of the Riverview Hotel, Emily Carter felt a profound sense of relief. The oppressive weight that had hung over the place had lifted, leaving behind an eerie calm. The guests and the staff still gathered in the lobby slowly began to disperse, murmuring in hushed tones about the night's events. Emily sat down on one of the plush but worn-out sofas, her mind racing with everything that had happened. She knew she had to ensure that the truth about the Riverview Hotel was brought to light, not just for the sake of the spirits she had freed, but also to prevent any future tragedies. She pulled out her phone and called her colleague, Detective Mike Hernandez, briefing him on the night's events and the evidence she had uncovered. Mike, always a skeptic but trusting of Emily's instincts, agreed to come over immediately with a forensics team. While she waited, Emily meticulously documented her findings, photographing the documents and the hidden compartment she had discovered in room 214. Mike arrived with the forensics team shortly after dawn. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense attitude, but even he looked unnerved as he stepped into the lobby. "Emily, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Ghosts? Disappearances? Are you sure about this?" Emily nodded, handing him the ledger and letters she had found. "Mike, these documents detail the crimes committed by Charles Delacroix. The evidence is overwhelming. The spirits of his victims were trapped here, and they needed justice to move on." Mike examined the documents, his brow furrowing. "This is incredible. If this is true, we have a massive case on our hands." The forensics team began their work, collecting samples and photographing the hidden room. As they worked, Emily and Mike went through the guest register and cross-referenced the names with missing persons reports from the past century. The connections were undeniable. Many of the missing guests had simply vanished without a trace, their cases going cold for decades. Emily felt a sense of satisfaction as the evidence mounted. They were finally bringing justice to the forgotten victims of the Riverview Hotel. The media quickly picked up on the story, and within hours, reporters began to swarm the hotel, eager to learn more about the haunted past of the once grand establishment. In the days that followed, the Riverview Hotel became the center of a media frenzy. News outlets covered the story extensively, interviewing guests, staff, and Emily herself. The hotel's dark history and the recent supernatural events captured the public's imagination, leading to a renewed interest in paranormal investigations. Despite the chaos, Emily remained focused on ensuring the hotel's dark legacy was not forgotten. She collaborated with historians and paranormal experts to piece together a comprehensive account of Charles Delacroix's crimes. The story of the Riverview Hotel was published in newspapers and online, becoming a cautionary tale of greed, power, and the quest for justice. As the public interest grew, so did the calls for the Riverview Hotel to be preserved as a historical site. The city of San Antonio decided to renovate the hotel, turning it into a museum dedicated to its history and the victims who had been lost within its walls. The museum would include exhibits on the paranormal, with Emily's findings forming a central part of the narrative. One evening, a few weeks after the climactic events, Emily found herself back at the Riverview Hotel, now closed to the public as renovations began. She walked through the now empty lobby, feeling a sense of closure. The building that had once been a place of horror and despair was now a symbol of hope and justice. As she made her way to the rooftop terrace, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The spirits of the hotel had reached out to her, seeking help, and she had answered their call. She had faced her fears, uncovered the truth, and brought peace to those who had suffered. Emily stood at the edge of the terrace, looking out over the San Antonio River. The city was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, and she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had made a difference not just for the spirits of the past, but for the living as well. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Mike. "Great work, Emily. We couldn't have done this without you. There's talk of an award for your bravery. Drinks to celebrate." Emily smiled, typing a quick response. "Thanks, Mike. Drinks sound good. Meet you at O'Malley's?" As she put her phone away, she took one last look at the Riverview Hotel. It was no longer a place of fear, but a place of remembrance and healing. The spirits of the past had found peace, and so had she. With a final nod to the building that had changed her life, Emily turned and walked away, ready for whatever challenges the future might bring.